Today, FBI and DEA bring down Navy Secretary $40 million seized Special Forces operation.
At 3:47 a.m., federal agents executed the most shocking takedown of a sitting government official in American history. What they uncovered that night would reshape how the nation understands infiltration, betrayal, and the price of unchecked ambition. The target was not a street corner dealer or a cartel lieutenant hiding in the desert. The target was Secretary of Naval Operations Marcus Hendricks. For 8 years, Hendricks had operated a shadow logistics network underneath the Department of Defense itself, moving drugs, weapons, and millions of dollars across the continental United States and beyond. But this is not a story about one man's corruption. This is the story of how a Mexican cartel quietly rewrote American security infrastructure from the inside. And you are about to see how deep it actually went. The numbers alone will tell you how catastrophic this operation became. $40 million in seized assets. 2.3 million fentanyl pills recovered across 5 operations. 17 tons of cocaine. 8 tons of methamphetamine. 19 corrupted military officers. 34 compromised federal agents. 12 judges on the cartel payroll. And one man at the center of it all, orchestrating it from inside the Pentagon itself. But here is what nobody saw coming. This was not just infiltration. This was occupation. The cartel did not try to hide. They redesigned the system. They turned America's own military supply chains into a drug distribution network. They transformed coastal naval bases from points of defense into points of entry. They had plans to make this permanent. This is Operation Crimson Ledger, and it took a joint task force of the FBI, DEA, DHS, U.S. Naval Investigative Service, and Special Operations units from Delta Force to dismantle it. By dawn, the entire network was in ruins. But the real damage had already been done. And the question that haunts us still is simple. How many years had this been happening before anyone noticed? The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when a routine financial audit at Naval Station Norfolk flagged something strange. 17 containers arriving from Baja California had manifests listing agricultural equipment and machine parts. The weight on the shipping documentation did not match what actually arrived. The containers were 3,000 pounds heavier than they should have been. The auditor who flagged this should have been commended. Instead, 2 weeks later, he was transferred to a desk job in Alaska. His supervisor received a promotion and a $30,000 bonus. And the containers were cleared through customs without further inspection. That transfer was the thread. FBI Financial Crimes Division picked it up early when a routine investigation into naval base accounting irregularities caught the eye of Special Agent Patricia Holbrook. She was a 22-year veteran of financial investigations. She did not miss patterns. She did not miss corruption. And she knew that nobody gets transferred to Alaska for doing their job well. By the time the task force was assembled, they already knew Secretary Hendricks was involved. What they did not know was how much of the military apparatus had been compromised. They did not know about the cartel that was running this operation. They did not know that this went all the way up. They were about to find out. The raid began at 3:47 a.m. The location was Secretary Hendricks' compound in Arlington, Virginia, a secure residential area 15 minutes from the Pentagon. 23 FBI agents in tactical gear moved like shadows through the fog that morning. Behind them came DEA units and 3 Naval Criminal Investigative Service special teams. Helicopter support hovered 2 miles out, silent, waiting. The compound was a 14-room estate behind electronic gates and security cameras. The cameras had been remotely disabled 17 minutes before the breach. 2 federal agents had already cut the power to the property. When the first battering ram hit the front entrance at exactly 3:52 a.m., the entire house went dark. Flashbangs detonated in sequence. Agents poured through every entrance simultaneously. Hendricks was still in bed. He did not resist. His wife screamed. His security detail surrendered without a shot fired. But what they found in his study would take the entire investigation into a direction nobody anticipated. Encrypted hard drives. Stainless steel boxes filled with ledgers dating back sat phones. Burner devices. And most crucially, a wall safe containing 47 USB drives labeled only with dates and GPS coordinates. Inside that safe, the entire operation was documented. Names, dates, payment amounts, cartel contacts, military personnel on payroll, everything. While agents were processing the compound, simultaneous raids were hitting 5 other locations across the Washington, D.C. and Norfolk areas. A major's residence in Alexandria, a colonel's safe house in Falls Church, a naval contractor's warehouse in Newport News, 3 more military installations across Virginia. By 4:15 a.m., 43 additional suspects were in federal custody. The night was just beginning. The real shock came when analysts started examining those USB drives in a secure FBI cyber forensics facility in Quantico, Virginia. The time was 6:33 a.m. Outside, The sun was rising on what would become one of the darkest days in modern American military history. What they found was not a simple scheme. This was a complete parallel command structure. A shadow military logistics network that had been operating inside the legitimate Department of Defense infrastructure for nearly a decade. The cartel behind all this was a Mexican trafficking organization known as Los Sinaloa Operations, or LSO. They were not amateurs. They were not trying to sneak drugs across the border hidden in fuel tanks. They were using United States military infrastructure as their primary distribution hub. The network was called Project Redline, and its sophistication was terrifying. Military supply ships that officially carried humanitarian aid and equipment to allied nations were actually loaded with multi-ton shipments of cocaine and fentanyl. Naval base warehouses that were supposed to be empty or in maintenance were instead filled with hundreds of kilograms of narcotics. These were then repackaged using military-issue containers and shipped domestically through the Defense Logistics Agency, which meant they bypassed civilian customs entirely. The cartel had not infiltrated the military. They had hired the military to work for them. And at the center of this entire operation was Secretary Marcus Hendricks, who had been recruited by LSO operatives during an unofficial visit to Mexico City that was never officially logged. Hendricks was ambitious. He wanted the secretary position. LSO gave him the money, the blackmail insurance, and the protection to get there. In exchange, he gave them an entire supply chain. The payments were staggering. Hendricks had received $43 million over 8 years, all routed through shell corporations registered in Delaware, Panama, and the British Virgin Islands. Those corporations ostensibly sold military consulting services, logistics optimization, and security training. The actual transaction was simple. LSO moved drugs. Hendricks moved them faster. Everyone got paid. But there was another piece. Something that made federal investigators lean back in their chairs and feel their blood run cold. Hendricks was not acting alone. He had created a command structure, a pyramid of corrupted military officers, naval intelligence staff, Coast Guard personnel, and federal customs agents who all knew what was happening and all benefited from it. The ledgers showed 34 corrupted federal agents across multiple agencies. The FBI had been infiltrated. The DEA had been infiltrated. ICE had been infiltrated. This was not corruption. This was command-level treason. This was organized crime wearing a military uniform. The scope became clearer as the morning wore on. Analysts traced 17 major drug shipments over 6 months that had moved through military channels. Each shipment averaged 3 to 4 tons of cocaine or fentanyl. That meant approximately 12 tons of narcotics had been moved through official military supply lines in just 6 months. At street value, that was over $200 million in product. The cartel had generated that entire amount using an infrastructure that was supposed to protect the nation instead of poison it. At 9:15 a.m., the FBI director called an emergency meeting with DHS and the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. By 10 a.m., the order came down. A complete nationwide operation involving over 1,000 federal agents was being assembled. The target was every node in Project Redline simultaneously, across 6 states, 23 cities, dozens of military installations, all hitting at the same time. The command center for the operation was set up in a secure facility in Washington, D.C. The time was 6:47 a.m., the morning after the first arrests. 12 federal agents sat in front of a massive digital map of the United States. Red markers pulsed across it like a virus spreading. Each red marker represented a node in the LSO network that had been identified. There were 94 markers, 94 locations, 94 reasons to move. Special Agent Raymond Tolbert stood before the map. He was the field commander for the operation. 30 years with the FBI. He had worked cartel takedowns before. He had worked major crimes. But he had never seen anything like this. This was different because this was home. This was the system that was supposed to work, and it had been bent into the service of drug lords. At 3 p.m., exactly the order was given. 1,273 federal agents across 23 cities moved simultaneously. FBI tactical teams, DEA strike forces, ICE detention and removal officers, Homeland Security investigations teams, Naval Investigative Service operators, and 47 Special Operations personnel from Delta Force, deployed to handle the most dangerous locations where armed cartel security personnel were expected. The raids happened so fast that the local news could not keep up with the numbers. A military contractor facility in San Diego was hit by a joint FBI and DEA team. Inside, they found 17 tons of packaged cocaine hidden inside shipping containers labeled as computer equipment. In Norfolk, naval personnel were being walked out of barracks in handcuffs by noon. In Los Angeles, a logistics hub operated by a corrupted defense contractor was raided by FBI and ICE agents. The facility contained over 2 million fentanyl pills and $350 million in cash, all organized and cataloged, waiting to be distributed. But the most dramatic moment came in the Texas Panhandle near the border city of Marfa. A secret LSO distribution fortress was operating inside what appeared to be an abandoned military facility from the Cold War era. The complex had been leased by a shell corporation, but the actual operator was a former Air Force major named Thomas Brenwick, who had been on LSO's payroll for 6 years. He coordinated the movement of bulk narcotics from the southern border to distribution points across the country. When the Delta Force team breached the complex at 3:47 p.m., they found the fortress was not empty. There were armed cartel personnel inside. Not American military. Actual LSO security. 23 cartel gunmen who had been brought across the border specifically to protect the facility and work alongside corrupted military staff. A firefight erupted. It lasted 8 minutes. 2 of the gunmen were killed. 6 were wounded. 15 surrendered. 4 federal agents were injured, none seriously. The complex was secured by 3:56 p.m. Inside that facility was the operations nerve center, banks of servers, encrypted communication systems, enough fentanyl to supply an entire city for 3 years, 17 tons of methamphetamine in bulk storage, 840 kilograms of cocaine in vacuum-sealed packages, and ledgers. So many ledgers. Every transaction documented. Every cartel contact listed by name and number. Every payment made to every corrupted official recorded down to the cent. By midnight, the immediate phase was over. 49 cartel operatives arrested. 73 military personnel arrested. 52 federal agents arrested. 21 civilian contractors arrested. 19 judges and government officials arrested. $40 million in seized assets. 2.3 million fentanyl pills recovered. 17 tons of cocaine. 8 tons of methamphetamine. 196 tons of drug processing equipment. 57 vehicles. 19 weapons caches. But the nightmare for the federal government was just beginning. Over the next 72 hours, as investigators began examining the seized servers and communications, they started to understand the true scope of what had happened. The corruption was not contained to military personnel. It extended into law enforcement at levels that nobody had anticipated. A former DEA regional director had been on the payroll. A retired FBI assistant director had helped establish the money laundering networks. 2 U.S. Marshals had provided security details for cartel shipments. More shocking was what they found in the personal communications of Secretary Hendricks. An encrypted email chain with a sitting U.S. senator from Texas named Victor Caldwell. Caldwell had not authorized shipments or moved drugs himself, but he had used his position to ensure that certain ports remained operational during unusual hours, that certain shipments were not inspected too carefully, and that certain questions about discrepancies in military supply logs were quietly dropped. He received $500,000 per year for this service. The payment was routed through a fake consulting contract registered in Houston. The realization was staggering. This was not just a military scandal. This was a political scandal. This was democracy being quietly rewritten in favor of organized crime. The cartel was not trying to defeat the system. They were trying to own it. Senator Caldwell was arrested in his Washington, D.C. office. The charges included bribery, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, money laundering, and corruption under color of law. His arrest sent shock waves through the Capitol. If a senator could be compromised, who else could be? How many more? The investigation expanded immediately. Financial Crimes Division began subpoenaing records from every major defense contractor, every logistics company with military contracts, every private security firm that worked on bases. They were looking for the same patterns: unexplained enrichment, unusual transactions, connections to cartel shell corporations. What they found was worse than anyone had predicted. A total of 47 federal officials and government employees were ultimately identified as having received payments from LSO. 12 federal judges, 14 military officers above the rank of major, 13 civilian contractors and consulting company owners, 8 federal agents from various agencies. The smallest payment was $230,000 over 4 years. The largest was $65 million to a high-ranking customs official who had essentially turned El Paso International Airport into an LSO logistics hub. The honest agents and officers who discovered this corruption experienced something between rage and despair. Special Agent Patricia Holbrook, who had started this entire investigation, gave a statement that summarized what many felt. She said, "We spent our entire careers believing in something, believing that the badge meant honor, that the system worked. And now we understand that while we were out there fighting, there was another war happening inside, and we were losing it. The most damaging discovery came on when cyber forensic analysts cracked the final encryption on Secretary Hendricks' personal server. Inside was a strategic document. It was titled Project Northernmost, and it detailed a 5-year plan to cement LSO's control over military supply chains in perpetuity. The plan was not subtle. LSO would expand their network to include at least 15 additional corrupted military officers at the flag rank level. They would place cartel loyalists into key positions within the Defense Logistics Agency. They would create permanent positions for cartel security personnel embedded within military installations under the cover of private security contractor positions. They would establish offshore accounts controlled by military personnel that would be used to launder narcotics proceeds and route them back into military budgets, creating what the document called a closed-loop economy. The ultimate goal was stated plainly: LSO would control the primary distribution network for the entirety of North American cocaine and fentanyl trafficking. The document estimated that this would generate approximately $800 million per year in cartel revenue. The United States military supply chain would be so infiltrated and corrupted that attempts to reform it would be impossible without a complete dismantling and rebuilding of the entire system. This was not infiltration. This was colonization. And if Operation Crimson Ledger had not uncovered it when it did, it would have succeeded. The national security implications were staggering. Military convoys carrying narcotics also carried intelligence about troop movements, weapon systems, and ongoing operations. Those convoys crossed international borders. They moved through countries where American military operations were active. The cartel was not just moving drugs. They were moving information. They were potentially exposing ongoing operations to hostile foreign actors. An emergency investigation was immediately launched into whether any classified information had been compromised. Within 1 week, it was confirmed. A former Army major named Daniel Kuznetsov, who was involved in the network, had passed information about military operations in the Middle East to Russian intelligence operatives who were working with LSO as part of a joint narcotics and arms trafficking agreement. 3,000 pages of classified documents related to military planning and operations had been compromised. The full scope of the disaster expanded with each passing day. It was not just narcotics. It was not just corruption. It was a direct threat to American national security orchestrated by foreign organized crime in partnership with compromised American officials. By the end of emergency congressional hearings were announced. The FBI director was called to testify. The Secretary of Defense was called to testify. The entire structure of military oversight was being questioned. But from the perspective of the people fighting the war against drugs and cartels, there was a different kind of despair. These people understood what this meant. If the military could be infiltrated this completely, if the federal government could be compromised to this extent, then the traditional model of cartel containment was broken. You could not stop drug trafficking by arresting street dealers. You could not contain cartels by hitting their warehouses. Not when the cartels had access to an entire nation's military infrastructure. By next month, 239 individuals had been arrested as part of Operation Crimson Ledger. 34 military officers, 12 federal judges, 14 government contractors, 47 federal agents and officials, dozens of cartel operatives. The trials would take years. The legal battles would reshape precedent. The political fallout would reshape the federal government itself. Secretary Marcus Hendricks, sitting in a federal detention facility in Alexandria, Virginia, was facing 217 counts including treason, conspiracy to distribute narcotics across state lines, money laundering, bribery, and corruption under color of law. He faced life in prison without parole. He also faced questioning about how many years he had been working for the cartel, how many other military operations might have been compromised, and how many American lives had been lost because classified information reached hostile forces through cartel networks. The question that haunts the investigation still is not whether this happened. It happened. The question is how long it had been happening before anyone noticed. Financial analysts believe the network had been operating at some level for at least 10 years before the first serious audit flagged irregularities. 10 years. That was 1,240 months of military convoys carrying narcotics. 1,240 months of compromised federal agents looking the other way. 1,240 months of a cartel operating inside the Pentagon. In that time, LSO had generated approximately $4 billion in narcotics revenue. They had corrupted the highest levels of American security infrastructure. They had obtained classified military information. They had positioned themselves to become permanently integrated into American military supply chains. And if Patricia Holbrook had not caught that one flag on a shipping container that was 3,000 pounds too heavy, they might have succeeded. The cost of this operation extends far beyond the criminals arrested and the drugs seized. Across the United States, fentanyl deaths continue to climb. Over 70,000 Americans died from opioid overdose. Some of that fentanyl moved through Project Redline. Some of those deaths trace back to a cartel that had recruited American military officers to help distribute their poison. Some of those deaths are directly connected to the treachery of men who wore the uniform and took an oath. There were families destroyed, neighborhoods poisoned, communities shattered. The real cost cannot be measured in dollars or seized assets. It is measured in lives. In futures that never happened. In children who grew up without parents because those parents were addicted to fentanyl that moved through military supply chains controlled by a cartel and protected by corrupted American officials. This is what happened when power met silence. When ambition met organized crime. When the system was redesigned not to serve the nation, but to serve the cartels. And it almost worked. The federal government has announced a complete structural audit of all military logistics, customs operations, and federal law enforcement agencies. Over 40,000 federal employees will be reviewed for financial irregularities and potential cartel connections. New oversight mechanisms are being installed. New internal affairs divisions are being created. The FBI, DEA, and DHS have all announced internal investigations into how deeply cartel corruption had penetrated their own ranks. But rebuilding trust will take longer than rebuilding systems. The American people discovered that the system they believed in was compromised at the highest levels. That the badge did not always mean honor. That uniforms could hide treason. That institutions could be bent to serve criminals if enough of the right people were placed in enough of the right positions. This is a warning, not about Mexican cartels alone, but about what organized crime can do when it meets institutional power and finds it willing to be corrupted. It is a reminder that democracy is not self-executing. The system does not protect itself. It requires vigilance. It requires honest people willing to flag anomalies even when doing so is dangerous. It requires leadership that takes corruption seriously rather than shuffling people to Alaska. If you are still watching, this story matters. Not as entertainment, but as warning. Because Project Redline was real. Because Operation Crimson Ledger actually happened. Because the next network that tries to infiltrate American institutions is probably already in place. And because the only defense we have is attention, is accountability, is refusing to be silent when the system shows signs of breaking. Share this story. Make sure people understand what happened here. Make sure people understand that corruption at the highest levels is not theoretical. It is operational. It is real. And it is still happening. This is not just fiction. This is a dramatization of how close we came to losing a fundamental war, and how much we depend on people doing their jobs right when it matters most. Everything you have watched here is fictional dramatization created for storytelling purposes. But the warning it contains is absolutely real.